on my in-laws' private jet. My wife and mother-in-law try to throw my daughter and me out midair, laughing, "Fall like the trash you are." I clung to my little girl as the door opened, certain we'd die. When the plane landed and police looked inside the cockpit, my wife screamed. I'm standing at the edge of a marble terrace, staring out at the rolling hills behind the Langston estate. The wind smells like jasmine and old money. My 6-year-old son, Noah, is kicking a soccer ball on the lawn with a nanny watching nearby. He's laughing, golden light hitting his hair just right. And yet, all I feel is rage. Because 3 years ago, I was a different man. I just left my position as a special agent with the DEA. I'd built a private counter-narcotics consulting firm from scratch, my way of fighting back against the cartels from the outside. I had contracts with Homeland Security, local governments, even the Canadian Border Authority. I was finally doing it, living on my own terms. Then I met Avery Langston. It was at a veterans charity fundraiser in Nashville. She walked in like a perfume commercial, red dress, jet black hair, and those piercing blue eyes that looked like they could see your soul and rearrange it. She approached me first, not typical for a woman from her family. She asked questions that most people are too self-involved to ask, about operations, ethics, trauma. She said I was the first real man she'd met in her entire life. Avery was smart and strategic, too strategic. We were married 6 months later. I thought I was marrying up. I thought I was joining something elite. What I didn't realize was that I was walking into a cage. The Langstons built their fortune on biotech and pharmaceuticals. Martin Langston, Avery's father, had turned Langston Laboratories into a global giant. Her mother, Celeste, came from oil money. Together, they ruled Tennessee's upper class like they'd inherited the throne of the South. And from day one, I was the outsider. New money, they said, though I'd never had money growing up. My dad was a cop. My mom cleaned houses. I made myself. But to the Langstons, I was dirt in a tailored suit. We should move into the guest estate, Avery had said 6 months after our wedding. It's only temporary until our son's born. That temporary turned into permanent. And slowly, everything I built was stripped away. Martin offered to invest in my firm. I was hesitant, but Avery insisted. It'll grow faster with help, she said. You need support, not pride. I should have known. Within a year, contracts vanished. My email accounts got hacked. I'd later learn Martin hired most of my key staff away, offering them huge salaries and NDAs. When the firm collapsed, Langston Biotech swept up my intellectual property for pennies. A clean start, Avery had called it. I was furious, ready to leave. But I'd made the mistake of trusting her again. We had Noah now, and their lawyers made it crystal clear. If I walked, I'd never see him again. Martin had friends in judgeships. Celeste chaired 2 different family court foundations. They'd already whispered to reporters that I had emotional volatility from my DEA days. So I stayed. But I didn't stay silent. What they didn't know, I still had contacts. Old DEA, NSA, even a favor from an Interpol asset in Zurich. And I started collecting emails, financial reports, internal memos. The Langstons weren't just corrupt. They were murderers. Their latest drug, Removox, had been marketed as a breakthrough non-opioid painkiller. In reality, it triggered fatal seizures in patients with a certain genetic marker. They knew, and they hid it. I found the early clinical trials, the cover-ups, the death toll, 284 and rising. And the kickbacks? Millions funneled to FDA advisors through shell consulting firms. Celeste's name appeared on 3 of the payments. The most damning evidence was buried in Martin's home office. A hidden safe, biometric lock. But I found the override one night when he forgot to reset it. Inside, contracts, foreign wire logs, a memo where Celeste literally wrote "too late to recall." Our PR team can control the narrative post-litigation. They plan to pay the fines and keep the drug on shelves. Noah was my reason for surviving every lie. Every dinner where Martin mocked me in front of guests. Every fake charity gala where Avery smiled like we were the Kennedys. I endured it all to protect my son. And in one night, I overheard something through a cracked door. Martin, Celeste, and Avery were in the sunroom. I was walking past to get a glass of water. but I froze when I heard my name. We need to get rid of him, Martin said coldly. He's not going quietly. Avery's voice. He'll never agree to split custody. And we can't afford him talking to the wrong people. Celeste, there's options. He used to be DEA. Dangerous line of work. Accidents happen, especially on foreign consulting trips. Martin, no, too traceable. But we do have a jet. I felt something primal click in my brain. They weren't divorcing me. They were planning my murder. That night, I slept with a knife under my pillow. I emailed everything to 3 different cloud accounts, encrypted. I updated my will, left a note with a friend in Atlanta. And then I smiled through breakfast like nothing had changed. Because if they wanted a war, they just declared it. But before we go further, let me ask you something. If your in-laws plotted your murder, would you fight back or disappear? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life revenge stories. The Langstons had a trip planned, a family retreat to the Blue Ridge cabin in North Carolina. Remote, private, no cell signal for miles. The perfect place for an accident. Martin brought it up at brunch. We could all use a break, he said. Fresh air, no reporters. Just family time. I'll play my part. Sounds great, I said, sipping black coffee while imagining how he'd look in handcuffs. What they didn't know was that I'd already activated my safety net. My old DEA partner, Jonas Mercer, now works cybercrimes for the U.S. Marshals. I'd been sending him files for months. 3 days before the trip, we met at a bar disguised as a speakeasy in Chattanooga. This is enough to bury them, Jonas said, flipping through the encrypted tablet I handed him. Not just fraud, I said. Manslaughter. Medical genocide. He looked up. If you go on that trip, it could be a one-way ride. I have to go, I said. They won't move unless I'm vulnerable. But I need you close. When I send the signal, come hard. And bring hell. He nodded. You sure about this? They want a dead man, I said. I'm going to give them a ghost. Langston Airfield wasn't marked on any commercial map. It sat behind a private vineyard, shielded by hills and trees, with just enough clearance for Martin's personal Gulfstream G500 to glide in like a shark with wings. We loaded into the plane just after dawn. Avery wore a white designer sweatsuit, her expression unreadable. Celeste pretended not to see me. Martin shook my hand like we were going on vacation instead of plotting my accident. Noah was clutching his toy dinosaur, excited about the trip. He looked up at me and said, "Do planes fly faster than rockets?" "They do in our stories," I told him. Inside the jet was everything you'd expect from a billionaire's toy. Mahogany finishes, imported leather seats, crystal drinkware, and a small private cabin in the back. Noah was seated next to me with his headphones on. Avery kept to the opposite side. The Langstons sat up front. I knew the flight plan. I knew the crew. I'd studied it all. And most importantly, I knew what was coming. The co-pilot was someone new. I flagged that instantly. Dane McAllister, according to the manifest. Hired just last month. No digital footprint. No LinkedIn. No online license records. No past flights logged. A ghost. Probably ex-military. Probably off the books. And definitely not hired to serve champagne. At 38,000 feet, Martin stood and made his move. He walked back to my seat and smiled like a man presenting a birthday gift. Mind stepping back with me for a minute, Callan? Yeah, I changed my name. You don't get to keep your old name once your life becomes bait. I nodded, stood up, gave Noah a wink, and followed Martin into the rear cabin. Celeste and Avery trailed behind like snakes, slithering toward the final act. Once the door shut, Martin sat down. He pulled out a leather folder. Inside were a series of documents. A full parental rights termination, confession of corporate theft, and a personal admission that I'd been abusing prescription drugs from the DEA days. I laughed. Subtle. No point dancing around it, he said. You sign these, we give you $10 million and a one-way ticket out of the country. You disappear, and Noah grows up in peace. And if I say no, Martin's smile dropped. Celeste stepped forward. You won't have the chance to say no more than once. Then she reached in her bag and pulled out a small syringe. The clear liquid inside gave me chills. I'd seen this before. Succinylcholine. Paralyzes the muscles, shuts down the lungs. Leaves no trace if administered properly. Used in executions or assassinations. Avery didn't flinch. She brought our son on a death flight. That was the moment I stopped thinking of her as the woman I married. You've got about 30 seconds to sign before this whole thing gets messy, Martin said. I tilted my head. 30 seconds? That's cute. They blinked. What? Before he could finish, I pressed the panic button sewn in my waistband. It sent an encrypted signal via satellite to Jonas. Code red. Move now. Then I smiled. You ever hear of a sting operation at 38,000 feet? Martin's face cracked first. Celeste looked toward the cockpit. Avery's eyes widened. I pulled a voice recorder from my jacket. You're all on tape, I said. From the syringe, to the threats, to the fake custody docs. And that co-pilot? Donna? He's not one of yours. He's FBI. So is the air traffic controller on the other end. You're bluffing, Celeste hissed. Just then, the plane banked sharply. The fastened seatbelt lights lit up. Martin stumbled. Avery reached for the wall. I opened the cabin door and shouted forward. Jonas now. Within seconds, the jet began descending rapidly. Emergency altitude. Over the intercom, the voice of Special Agent Jonas Mercer came through. This is the U.S. Marshals. You are under federal protection. Do not resist. The Langstons tried. They surged toward me, screaming. Avery lunged for the recorder. I shoved her back with a strength I didn't know I had. That's for Noah. Celeste tried to inject me with the syringe. I grabbed her wrist, twisted, and slammed it into the mahogany table. She screamed. Martin went for the cockpit. Jonas met him halfway, sidearm drawn. Try it, he said flatly. They were trapped. Altitude dropping. Evidence secured. Pilot under government control. I crouched next to Avery, who sat dazed and bleeding from her lip. You brought our son on a flight where you planned to kill me. You wouldn't go quietly, she whispered. You never did. Now you'll go in cuffs. By the time the jet touched down at a secure airfield in Georgia, a SWAT team was waiting. Noah had no idea what happened. He slept through the arrest, curled up with his dinosaur. I carried him off the plane, past the Langstons being dragged in shackles. Martin shouted, You think this is over? You're nothing without her. I turned slowly. No, I said. I'm everything because of her. I'm sitting in a bland U.S. Marshal safe house, 40 miles outside Atlanta, watching breaking news flash across every screen. Langston Biotech under federal investigation. Family empire crumbling amid allegations of murder and fraud. Noah is on the couch behind me, coloring with a set of crayons. He hums quietly to himself, completely unaware that the world around us is on fire. The Langstons' private jet, their murder machine, had barely cooled on the tarmac before federal agents swarmed it. Jonas had pulled strings I didn't even know existed. Intercepted the plane, arranged backup pilots, fake IDs for 2 marshals as crew, even set up emergency landing clearance with a sealed warrant. But this storm, it's bigger than anyone expected. Martin Langston is in custody without bail. Celeste Langston is pleading medical issues, but they denied her request for house arrest. Avery, she's trying to play the victim card, saying she was manipulated by her parents, that she only went along to protect Noah. But they've all underestimated how deep I dug, how much I prepared. The files I gave Jonas weren't just about Removox. I uncovered a second, buried trial from years ago, a neuroregenerative drug called Neurocelex. It was supposed to treat early-stage Alzheimer's. In testing, it caused rapid-onset dementia and violent seizures in healthy participants. They buried it, paid off families, threatened whistleblowers, claimed all deaths were unrelated. I had the original trial notes, emails from Celeste instructing PR teams to muddy the waters, and a payment trail that ended with a U.S. senator. Jonas couldn't believe it. This isn't corporate fraud, he said. It's industrial-scale homicide. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. Callum Briggs, I said. A woman's voice, calm but sharp. Mr. Briggs, this is Marla Jensen, lead prosecutor with the Eastern District Court. You're the key witness in the most important pharmaceutical fraud case in U.S. history. We need to talk. 2 hours later, I sat across from her in a secure conference room. She'd already read everything, had a team vetting all my evidence, verifying metadata, timestamping audio. "What you've done here," she said. "It's massive. This will be the trial of the century." "And my son?" I asked. "Protected. You have full custody under emergency orders. Your ex-wife will have to fight through a criminal conviction before she even gets visitation." I nodded slowly. That's all I wanted. Noah's safe. Everything else was noise. Marla leaned forward. "There's more, though." "What?" "We think the Langstons had more than 2 kill plots. We found payouts, suppressed autopsy reports, a string of deaths tied to investigative journalists, FDA analysts, even a senator's aide who was pushing for tighter pharmaceutical oversight." "How many?" "Too many for coincidence." She tapped a folder on the table. Inside were photos, 7 faces, names, details. All had accidents in the last decade. All were tied, in some way, to Langston biotech opposition. My blood ran cold. "So they've been killing people for years." She nodded. "You blew the lid off a murder syndicate dressed in lab coats and tax write-offs." I sat back, heart pounding. Avery didn't just try to kill me. She married me because she knew I was smart, capable, loyal. She used me like camouflage. Then when I started looking too close, she tried to erase me. That night, I sat with Noah in the safe house's little kitchen, watching him spoon cereal and giggle at a cartoon. "You doing okay, buddy?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, but when's Mommy coming back?" The words hit like a gut punch. I didn't want to lie to him. "She's going to be away for a while," I said carefully. "Grown-up decisions have consequences." "Did she do a bad thing?" "Yes," I said. "But that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You're safe now." He nodded again, solemn. Kids are resilient. But even resilience has its limits. The next week brought wave after wave of media coverage. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, even 60 Minutes. Whistleblower father exposes billion-dollar murder cover-up. From XDEA to hero dad. Callan Briggs takes down Langston Empire. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of me. I refused all interviews. I wasn't in this for fame. I was in this because people like Martin and Celeste Langston needed to be dragged into the light. Needed to answer for every overdose, every suppressed warning, every family they destroyed. But then came the twist. Jonas called me, voice tight. "They're flipping." "Who?" "Celeste. She's offering a deal. Full testimony against Martin and Avery. Claims she was under duress. Wants reduced sentencing." I laughed. "Hard." "She led the operation," I said. "She was the brain. Martin was the money. Avery was the mask." Jonas sighed. "Her lawyers know that. But they're pushing the battered spouse angle. Saying Martin ran everything, abused her emotionally. She pulled a syringe on me. She was going to kill me with my own son on board." "I know, Callan, and we have it on tape. But politics is politics. Marla says we may have to choose who we bury deepest." I sat in silence for a long time. Then I said, "Let's burn them all." The courtroom was packed. Every seat taken. Every hallway full of cameras and reporters trying to peek through the cracks of the justice system. At the front, Martin Langston sat behind the defense table with a team of 6 lawyers. Beside him, Celeste in a gray Chanel suit, her face carefully neutral. And on the far end, Avery. No shackles, no orange jumpsuit. Her lawyers had successfully argued for pre-trial image protection. And yet, she looked more imprisoned than anyone. Dark circles under her eyes. A mouth too still to be anything but scared. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. The prosecutor, Marla Jensen, rose for her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you will see over the coming weeks is not a case about business mistakes. It's about murders and suits. The Langstons orchestrated a billion-dollar conspiracy to hide the effects of deadly drugs. They lied to regulators, bribed federal agents. And when someone got too close," she paused. "They didn't sue. They silenced them." She hit every point like a hammer. The Removox cover-up, the buried NeuroCelex trials, the 7 mysterious deaths. And finally, the attempted murder of me, Callan Briggs, a federal contractor and husband, on a family flight. I was first to testify. I stood in front of the courtroom and told them everything. From the moment I met Avery to the moment she reached for a syringe on that plane. The room was dead silent. Martin didn't blink. Celeste twitched, but Avery looked like she was holding back tears. You stayed married even after your company was destroyed? The defense lawyer asked, trying to poke holes. I stayed for my son, I answered. If I'd left, they'd have erased me. And then they'd have erased him. Isn't it true you began recording conversations and gathering documents months before the plane incident? Yes. Why? Because I knew they were capable of anything. On the third day of the trial, it happened. Avery flipped. She asked for a private hearing with the judge and prosecution. Her attorney brought a new piece of evidence. A video, recorded secretly 2 weeks before the plane trip. Avery, Martin, and Celeste in a wine cellar. Martin bragging about how clean it would be if Callan disappeared in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Celeste laughing. Avery silent. She was scared, her attorney said. Terrified. She stayed quiet to protect her son. But what she said next changed everything. She planned her own escape. She was going to disappear with Noah, fake a kidnapping, blame it on me, and vanish to Europe with help from her mother's offshore accounts. The plane plot had been the backup. I couldn't go through with it, Avery said on the stand. But I didn't stop it either. Marla asked, do you regret it? Avery looked directly at me. I regret everything, especially thinking I could be part of that family and not become like them. Tears welled up. I lost myself in their world. I am sorry, Callan. I truly am. The judge allowed a brief recess. Jonas leaned in beside me. Do you believe her? I watched Avery, sitting alone at the witness table, trembling. I believe she regrets getting caught. By week 4, the prosecution had destroyed every defense argument. Paper trails, testimonies, autopsy reports long buried. They brought in Dr. Alan Ramos, a former Langston lab director who fled the country 5 years ago. He'd returned under federal protection. He confirmed that NeuroCelex had killed at least 19 participants, and that Celeste had personally ordered his silence with a $500,000 bribe and a death threat. She said, he testified, if you talk, your wife becomes a widow, and your son gets to grow up with a scar that reminds him why you shouldn't cross powerful people. The jury gasped. Celeste didn't flinch. When Martin finally took the stand, he tried charm. We were protecting our shareholders. Every industry has risk. But Marla came in with a kill shot. She pulled up a copy of Martin's handwritten memo to Celeste. Collateral casualties. Acceptable losses. And under it, her response. Then make the media bury them. 7 weeks in, the jury deliberated for only 2. They found Martin Langston guilty on all counts: conspiracy, corporate manslaughter, attempted murder, obstruction of justice. Celeste, guilty on every charge but one. She was acquitted of physically injecting any substances. Avery, guilty of conspiracy, not guilty on attempted murder. She testified. She'd cracked open the internal communications vault, but her betrayal still cost her 10 years minimum. Martin got 325 years in federal prison. No parole. Celeste, 120 years. Avery, 14 years, with parole eligibility after 9. As the sentences were read, Celeste glared at Avery like she'd never seen her before. Martin never looked at me, not once, but Avery did, through tears, through shame, and I gave her nothing back. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded me. I gave one statement. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. My son deserved a future. Hundreds of families deserve the truth. The Langstons built their fortune on corpses and blood money. But now, the world knows. It's been 4 months since the verdict, and not a day goes by where someone doesn't recognize me in public. People stop me at gas stations, grocery stores, airports. They don't ask for selfies. They just say, you gave us hope. You made them pay. You saved your kid. And every single time, I nod and say the same thing. I did what any parent would do. Except that's not true, because most parents don't marry into billion-dollar crime syndicates. Most don't collect 3 years of evidence while pretending to be part of the family. Most don't jump on a private jet knowing they might not make it back. Most don't get the chance to fight back. But I did, and now I'm doing something with it. I'm in Franklin, Tennessee again, where it all started. Only now, I own the land Martin Langston once tried to hide his secrets on. The Langston estate was seized in a federal property forfeiture, and I bought it at auction for exactly $1, a symbolic slap to the face. The media ate it up. Whistleblower father reclaims empire as public rehabilitation center. That's right. I turned the Langston estate into a nonprofit rehab and mental health clinic, built with funding from civil suits against Langston Biotech, operated with help from whistleblowers, survivors, and medical professionals who weren't afraid to tell the truth. We named it the Noah Project, after my son, and every innocent life the Langstons tried to destroy. Avery wrote me a letter from federal prison, handwritten, for pages. Apology, explanation, guilt, regret. She ended it by asking one thing. When I get out, will I ever be allowed to see Noah again? I haven't answered, because I don't know. I've spoken to therapists, to legal advisors, to Jonas, and they all say the same thing. You don't owe her anything. And I don't. But part of me still wonders if someday Noah will ask about his mother. And if I don't let her speak for herself, no matter how scripted, will I be robbing him of closure? So for now, the letter sits in a lockbox, unread by him, waiting. The lawsuits against Langston Biotech expanded into a federal class action. So far, 412 families have joined. The Department of Justice froze over $900 million in assets tied to Martin and Celeste. Most of it is being redirected to victim restitution. I've refused a dime. My compensation is simple: freedom and justice. 1 month ago, Jonas came to see me. You know, they're trying to build statues of you, he said, dropping a stack of magazines on my desk. Times cover, The Man Who Crushed a Dynasty. I shook my head. They're building a myth. Maybe, but sometimes myths are just the truth with better lighting. He sat down. So what's next? I rebuild, I told him. I raise my son. I stay quiet. You won't be able to stay quiet, Jonas said. Not when people start knocking. What do you mean? He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sealed manila envelope. Inside, 3 files, 3 companies, each one with connections to Langston Biotech, each one showing early signs of the same fraud, same cover-ups, same behavior. The Langstons weren't the only ones, Jonas said. They were just the loudest. I stared at the files. You want me to do it again? No, he said, but I think you will. I didn't answer that night. I didn't have to, because I already knew the truth. When you see how deep the rot goes, when you feel the heat of real evil hiding behind luxury and PR firms, you don't get to walk away. You either stay silent, or you pick up the torch. Noah just turned 7. He had a superhero birthday party, painted mask, bouncing in a rented castle, yelling, "Dad, watch this," every 5 seconds. I watched him the entire time. Not because I was worried, because I couldn't believe we made it. He doesn't ask about his mom much anymore. He stopped after one session with his therapist where he said, "Mommy got lost trying to be someone else." That's more truth than I ever could have given him. I'm now the founder of a new organization, PLAIN, Parent-Led Alliance for Investigating Narcotics. We're a small unit of analysts, investigators, and whistleblowers helping families sue corrupt pharmaceutical companies. We run out of a repurposed VA building in Alexandria. I sit in a glass office now, not a war zone, but I'm still fighting. Every day, someone emails us with a story. A brother overdosed. A daughter disappeared. A husband went manic after taking a trial drug that was perfectly safe. They send documents, footage, crying voicemails, and sometimes they send proof. The kind of proof that brings a company to its knees. I've already taken down one in Texas. 2 executives now indicted. 2 more pending. The cycle repeats. The corruption mutates. But this time, the virus has a new enemy. Me. Avery was released early. Parole board cited good behavior, full cooperation. Her lawyers contacted mine, offered to go through official reunification therapy with Noah. They'd signed a full agreement stating she had no custody rights. Just a wish to say sorry in person one day. I'll let my lawyer call her back. We'll think about it in 5 years. Just not now. Because she might have regrets, but regrets aren't a passport back into our lives. I get another text from Jonas. He's retired now, living in Vermont, growing tomatoes and pretending he doesn't miss the hunt. The text says, Heard about Clearwater Pharmaceuticals. That's you, isn't it? I reply, the buried trial data showing liver failure. Their VP tried to bribe a journalist. I handed it to DOJ last week. He texts back, remind me never to piss you off. I don't smile. I don't laugh. Because this isn't about rage anymore. It's about responsibility. Noah and I live in a 2-bedroom house on the edge of a lake now. No alarms. No cameras. Just the kind of silence you get when there's nothing left to hide from. Every night, before bed, he asks the same question. Daddy, can we make stories? It started after the trial, when his therapist said creative storytelling helps kids process trauma. We sit on the floor with Legos and sketch pads, making up characters. Superheroes. Villains. Missions. Escapes. Last week, he made one called Captain Sharp. He stops bad guys who hurt people for money, he said. But he doesn't have powers. Just his brain. And his daughter helps him. I didn't correct him. I just said that's a good story. And it is. Because in the end, the world didn't need another billionaire pretending to be a savior. It needed one man to survive the fire and come back holding a torch. Thank you for reading. Want more stories like this? Click like, comment your state, and subscribe for the next true life revenge story. And remember, love isn't weakness. It's the reason some of us refuse to die quietly.